fed the transcript as well of Debunking Wikipedia's article on Gamergate by MentisWave. Exodore 2000. Okay, hey race, another take on the subject. Livvy Dunne. Great. I'd love to hear it. Exodore 2000. Start this out with a quick rundown, but I should also state that if you're one of the Gamergate people, I recommend that you watch this video to the end with an open mind, as I will be including quite a lot of evidence against the narrative. Livvy Dunne. Alright, I'm gonna go into this with an open mind. Exodore 2000. You may have heard, to put it briefly, Gamergate was and still is one of the biggest examples of the establishment media utilizing the tactic of lying by omission. The Gamergate movement is generally a backlash against poor journalistic standards, woke scolding, and other forms of cringy, unnecessary identity politics in video games. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah, I definitely remember hearing about that before. I do think it's a shame they would use the tactic of leaving important details out, and I do agree that video games shouldn't be political unless it is directly a part of the game or has a plot in which that is part of it. And identity politics really shouldn't be brought into video games because it's really just unnecessary and just causes conflict and division, when a game should be a time and place that is fun and entertaining, not a place where people should be focusing on politics, because that just ruins the entire experience. Exodore 2000. And as well as other media, it first started with rumors about some girl trading, well, just say favors for positive media coverage, but later the movement evolved to have very little to do with those rumors, as it is only occasionally brought up in pro-Gamergate discussion boards these days. Livvy Dunne. It's good that the movement evolved to have little to do with those rumors, because it shouldn't be about some rumors that may or may not be true, especially after it was proven it wasn't true, and the people who pushed those rumors should have just let it go. Exodore 2000. And from that last source, the rumors had almost no basis. In fact, remember that game that supposedly she slept with a journalist? Well, we can say he never reported on that game, however she did date him. That part was fact. Livvy Dunne. So there was little to no evidence of this happening, and yet they spread these rumors around about her and made her life a living hell from all those rumors. And the fact the journalist never published articles about the game and only said that he played it on his own time, which was not related to his work at all. I don't understand the need to lie about her and make it seem like she did something wrong when it was all a complete lie. Exodore 2000. What I am saying, though her personal life should be her own to the outside, she did in fact date that journalist, so that could be where the rumor originated. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, that's totally plausible that it came from that, but she still didn't do anything wrong in either scenario, like she didn't do anything that needed people to be harassing her and sending her death threats. So even if she did sleep with him, which she didn't, it would not have warranted the reaction like that. You know. Exodore 2000. Yet I just wanted to put forward the fact is all. Livvy Dunne. That's still good to know, just to have all the facts on the matter. Exodore 2000. However, a small portion of Gamergaters were trolls who took it too far, things like threats of violence, blatant misogyny, and other such ship-flinging. Unfortunately, these trolls gave the journalists who were being criticized a perfect exit strategy to avoid that criticism, and this is where the big grift comes in. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, the amount of people who did those things were very small, but unfortunately they were also very vocal and got a lot of attention, and made the whole thing seem worse, because now they're the ones that everyone hears about when it comes to Gamergate. Exodore 2000. Yeah, true, and not only that, but what they were doing was awful. Death threats, rape threats, all targeted at these women to the point they had to leave their homes, if you remember. Livvy Dunne. It's horrific that anyone would have to experience that, especially just because some assholes online who decided to take someone's words and actions and twist it into more than what it was. And the worst part is the death and rape threats were probably from trolls who thought it was funny to make people feel unsafe. Exodore 2000. Exactly. Livvy Dunne. And I doubt many of them ever faced consequences for those threats, cause they probably were all anonymous accounts, and there's no way to really find who did it. Exodore 2000. The media decided to overwhelmingly only report on Gamergate as if everyone was a part of the misogynistic trolls, thus falsely painting all of Gamergate as a harassment campaign through the magic of guilt by association policy. It's kind of like if there is a protest with 1,000 people, or so, and maybe 10 of those protesters get into a fight. If the media wants to make the cause of the entire protest look bad, they can simply have the violent riot in favor of X idea emerges in town square as their headline, completely omitting the other 99 of protesters who did nothing wrong. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. It's like they decided to focus on all the negative stuff rather than some of the positive that happened, just to make gamers as a whole seem worse, and that most of them were like the trolls. It's like when the media only wants to focus on the bad stuff people do rather than the good stuff and make it seem like nothing good happens in the world and only bad things happen. Exodore 2000. Just like how say Fox reported on ELM. Livvy Dunne. And how they only reported all the negative things that happened and didn't really mention anything that the actual protesters were trying to do to stand up and stand together for the cause. Exodore 2000. So you see how that can color perception. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah, I definitely see how that can affect someone's views on something if they only see the bad stuff without seeing enough of the positive things about the movement. Exodore 2000. Or on the flip side, if the media wants to paint the cause of a protest in a positive light, they can publish the opposite headline, fiery but mostly peaceful protest, which as some may recall actually happened. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah, that's totally true. It's like they can make the same protest seem opposite depending on what opinion they hold or where their values are at. Exodore 2000. Media deception is very easy. It really doesn't take much effort for a dishonest journalist to only report the facts that agree with their bias in order to paint a story that is completely ridiculous. Simply omit whatever facts don't suit your narrative and presto, the remaining facts suit your narrative. This in a nutshell is the truth of Gamergate, and the big irony in it all is that because of a big part of Gamergate is a critique of media bias, and journalists use dishonest tactics to paint all of Gamergate as extremist bigots. Livvy Dunne. That's completely correct. A lot of the articles about Gamergate only really reported what they wanted to report, which was just basically only the terrible parts of what was happening, and didn't really tell the story of what happened when you also look at the other side of the movement and what the gamers who were a part of it was trying to do, and the people who are trying to make the movement better because they care. Exodore 2000. Let's not mince words either. What some of those people did was really bad. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, and I don't mean to downplay what happened at all, because that kind of behavior should have never happened and was never justified, because they really went after her for a long time and did a lot of bad things to her. It definitely was not at all what the movement was really trying to do, or at least it wasn't supposed to be that. Exodore 2000. Said journalists actually proved that Gamergate is right about them. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it's like they couldn't take criticism, so they decided to respond in a completely childish way and try to make everyone see the movement as being in the wrong when it was just a bunch of people wanting things to be better and for there to be change. Exodore 2000. So with the basics out of the way, we can now look at Wikipedia's Gamergate article and see just how much of this they got correct, and it's one of the most ridiculous pieces of propaganda on the internet. In fact, Wikipedia is possibly the biggest source of misinformation regarding Gamergate today, and continues to stand as the largest reason why it's impossible to have a reasonable, intelligent discussion about Gamergate. Livvy Dunne. Well, it's good to hear the actual facts about Gamergate, so I'll definitely have to look into what was on the Wikipedia article and see how things compared and see what they actually said compared to what you said and see what was changed and altered and made to be something it wasn't, and see what facts they got completely wrong. Exodore 2000. Your average person is just going to plug Gamergate into Google, see Wikipedia as the first result, and eat up the propaganda while having no idea that just about everything in this article is a dishonest spin job. So let's get down to refuting it. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it's like if you just Googled it without any info about the whole thing and you just read the Wikipedia, you'll think Gamergate was entirely just a bad toxic movement and that there was no actual criticism or real points that were being made. Exodore 2000. Starting with the summary at the top, Gamergate was an online harassment campaign initially conducted through the use of #Gamergate that promoted sexism and anti-progressivism in video game culture. First problem, there is no real evidence whatsoever that Gamergate was an organized harassment campaign. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, they had no proof of it being a harassment campaign, and it was just a tack used to talk about something specific, and people who were in Gamergate probably did have some anti-progressive views, but I'm sure the majority of them probably weren't trying to attack anyone, and it was mostly the trolls who did most of the attacking, like we said before. Exodore 2000. Everywhere the Gamergate was or still is actually organized, such as Kotaku in Action, GG Wiki, Gamergate.me, or even under well-known figures like Total Biscuit, Rest in Peace. All our work predominantly focused on ethics and journalism and countered movement against wokeness in the media. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah, those sides were actually mostly about the ethics and stuff, and like you mentioned, they also had some anti-progressive views, but I'm sure most were pretty civil about them and only shared them on those websites where they would discuss those topics with like-minded people. Exodore 2000. To actually find any alleged misogyny or harassment, you have to dig through individual troll accounts or even random shit posts on 4chan in order to find it. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, the amount of effort someone would have to put in to actually make a case about those kinds of things for the whole movement, and to be able to say it's a movement all about misogyny and anti-progressivism is just mind-boggling, since it was completely not the case that most people were just trying to talk about how journalists had gotten too personal and to try to make some changes, and they didn't hate progressivism altogether. They just didn't like how a lot of the woke people were trying to push their agenda and forcing things onto people. Exodore 2000. The most obvious proof of this would be in KIA's rules. How can a movement be a, quote, harassment campaign, and, quote, if their biggest organized community actively bans doxing individual accounts? Livvy Dunne. Yeah, that's a very good point, actually, cause if it was a harassment campaign, why wouldn't they ban people for trying to dox anyone and actually harass specific targets? That completely refutes the claims that Gamergate was a harassment campaign, cause they had rules in place to stop harassment. Exodore 2000. Misinformation, trolling, and harassment. If a movement that is supposedly founded on violent death threats banned the use of violent death threats on their primary discussion hub, they certainly aren't doing a very good job at being what they are accused of. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, that's literally proof that the movement isn't the awful thing that the media painted it out to be, and that's why we should look into these things instead of instantly believing everything we see on the surface. Cause when we actually dive deeper, we see that a lot of the stuff we believe to be true is just straight up lies, which makes you wonder what else isn't true. Exodore 2000. This evidence alone should be a red flag to anyone with common sense that the establishment narrative on Gamergate is clearly not founded in reality, and we are just getting started here. Beginning August 2014, it targeted women in the video game industry, notably game developers Zoe Quinn and Brianna Woon, and feminist media critic Livvy Dunne. Yeah, that's some really good evidence already that the media was just lying about Gamergate and pushing the whole harassment and misogyny narrative, but not including other factors like the fact that some members were doxed or banned from subs for trying to dox people or make death threats, which clearly shows that those kinds of things weren't allowed anywhere in the movement, and the media clearly knew this but just wanted to push the narrative. Exodore 2000. Bonita Sarkeesian. The harassment campaign included doxing, the threats of rape and death threats, more blaming the entire movement for the worst of its trolls via guilt by association. This is an example of another common grift employed by the cult of woke, the claim that criticism of X person or group automatically equates to hatred and harassment of X person or group. To put it simply, it's a straw man argument. This rationale only makes sense if you interpret all criticism, regardless of context, in the most bad faith interpretation you can't possibly think of. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, and they used that rhetoric to shut down any criticism of Anita or any points, and that's why they would get away with all the stuff they did, cause if anyone mentioned it at all, they would get crucified in the media for it. Exodore 2000. While there may have been a small handful of genuine shades thrown in the direction of these three people, a lot of what I have seen about them is genuine criticism, primarily how all three of them are arguably guilty of professional victimhood, which is a form of crowd bullying for the purpose of attention, and in some cases grifting. Livvy Dunne. And all of that is very valid criticism too, and people are allowed to criticize whoever they want as long as they have valid reasons for doing so, and in this case they definitely did. Exodore 2000. victims' books calling a lot of the alleged harassment against them into question whether or not you agree with any of this criticism, or if you think these allegations are a load of wool. Doesn't really matter. It's criticism, not hatred, not harassment. Criticism, very big difference. Gamergate, who's viewed as a right-wing backlash against progressivism. Livvy Dunne. Exactly. The difference between criticism and hate or harassment is very important, and something that seems to not be a thing in the world anymore, and people seem to forget that it's okay to have opinions, but it doesn't need to turn into harassment or hate just cause you disagree with someone. Exodore 2000. Gamergate proponents. Gamergaters have stated that they were in a social movement, but they had no leaders or manifesto, and statements claiming to represent Gamergate have been inconsistent or unfounded. Irrigators falsely accused Quinn of an unethical relationship with journalist Nathan Grayson, and more generally claimed there was an unethical collusion between the press and feminist, progressives, and social critics. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, the whole thing was a very loose community of people who felt the same way on one thing, but they weren't really one big thing. They were just a bunch of individual people who shared similar viewpoints who came together. Exodore 2000. These claims were widely dismissed as trivial conspiracy theories, groundless or unrelated to actual issues of ethics and gaming. IRA-gate supporters have frequently denied the harassment took place or falsely claimed that it was manufactured by the victims. So now we are getting into the information that is simply untrue. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, there were probably some people who made some wild theories, but a lot of the stuff they were trying to say about gaming journalism and the way ethics in gaming really was being ignored were completely valid and definitely needed to be talked about. Exodore 2000. Moderators of the pro-Gamergate discussion boards and contributors to the wiki all have compiled a fairly extensive amount of information in regards to what Gamergate is. Treating Gamergate as directionless is a flat-out lie. For instance, both the GG wiki and KIA wiki have the 3 Cs of Gamergate: corruption, collusion, and censorship, detailing the dishonesty of the establishment media and their backroom deals to hide their bullcrap. Seems fairly straightforward and consistent to me. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it seems like there was quite a bit of structure and organization between the groups and people involved. And for someone to just say it was just a bunch of random people with nothing really tying them together at all is a lie, cause they have quite a bit that ties them together, and they are all in this for the same main purpose, just with some minor differences on how they do it or believe in the cause. Exodore 2000. Wikipedia also claims that there is no evidence for set unethical collusion, dismissing it as a conspiracy theory. Now let's just think about that logically for a moment. Do you really think it is probable that games journalism is completely free from all forms of ethical issues 100%? Squeaky clean? Of course not. There is tons of documented evidence of bad journalism on both KIA's wiki and the GG Deep Freeze wiki. Just as a major example, out of dozens, the game journal Pros Like This was a private email group comprised of multiple gaming journalists from multiple different publications. Some of them were found to be colluding to publish similar stories in order to give those stories the illusion of greater legitimacy. Livvy Dunne. That is completely true. Like any other job in the world, there are going to be ethical issues and problems, and it's not like there was some massive scandal or anything, but there was definitely some bad journalism going on, and it was good for people to point out those problems so it can be better. Those things don't have to be massive big scandals to be a problem. Exodore 2000. When in reality it was just people meeting behind closed doors. Have you ever suspected that members of the establishment media collude to push certain narratives? Livvy Dunne. Yeah, and the way the articles have been written make it seem like they don't do anything like that because they know people won't look too deep into it, and so it's just another way to hide what's really going on. Exodore 2000. Well, at least in regards to gaming media, this seems to be the case. Proof of this mailing list along with the leak and list in full are available online and easily found by searching for it in DuckDuckGo. The effects of it could also be found in the Gamers Are Dead campaign, where multiple articles from multiple different major media circles all bore the same strange narrative that the identity of gamers has died. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah. That whole Gamers Are Dead campaign got a lot of negative criticism, and rightfully so, and you'd think after having that much outrage against it that people would try to change, but they just doubled down on the whole thing. Exodore 2000. to some mysterious massive wave of alleged misogyny, and this is where another big grift comes in. Notice how Wikipedia's Gamergate article doesn't mention the game journal prose leak anywhere. It's completely omitted, and yet on the GG Deep Freeze wiki it's cited as the primary factor in what truly set Gamergate off. While the whole conspiracy was the match that started the fire, it was not the barrels of gasoline close by that Trulimouth Gamergate exploded into what it was. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it was a lot of things that all together caused it to become such an out-of-control movement, and it's really unfortunate that they don't include the actual things that started it and just keep focusing on the whole harassment and misogyny, which they make it appear to be a way bigger thing than it was. But there really wasn't actual harassment coming from the actual Gamergate movement people. But that was mainly the reason why it blew up so much, cause they just wanted people to focus on that instead of the reason that it started. Exodore 2000. In fact, in my opinion, Gamergate would have likely happened at a later date, even without the whole rumors about trading favors for positive reviews thing happening. The problem of journalists colluding on narratives in order to give those narratives a false sense of consensus is a very big problem. Not just in the gaming media, but establishment media today as a whole. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, I agree that the journalists and reporters really are a big problem, especially in the big media outlets today. They have a lot of control over what's being put forward, and the way they write articles and stories has a big impact on how most people will see things, but a lot of them don't seem to use the power responsibly at all, and they've lost most of the trust that people had for media outlets in general, because they make stories more sensational and they try to push narratives instead of just reporting the facts and the full context of each story. Exodore 2000. It is this collusion, then conflicts of interest, that truly makes Gamergate what it is, and as for the last line here, it isn't completely untrue, but it does need to be pointed out that it's not so much feminism, but toxic wokeness in general. Most Gamergaters I have seen have nothing wrong with strong female characters in their games. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, Gamergate definitely wasn't completely against having female characters in video games. Like you said, it was more against the toxic wokeness that was being pushed to some extent, but I have seen some people also complain about when they make a character's background and story about their gender or sexual orientation, and some of them are completely okay with there being a gay person or a lesbian person in a game, but the reason why it's in there to begin with doesn't make sense, and they force it on the characters when it doesn't even matter in the first place. Exodore 2000. Yes, exactly. I no more want a badly written cis person in there than I do a badly written LGBT person. That's what they don't address. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, exactly. They think that everyone wanted less minority characters, which isn't the case. They just wanted them to be actually good characters and have there be a point to them being the gender or sexual orientation that they are. Like, if their gender or sexual orientation plays no role in the story and it never really needs to be shown, then why put it in there to begin with? It just doesn't make sense. Exodore 2000. You've seen characters in stories that were LGBT and they write them so well it doesn't really matter because they're still strong, well-written characters. The problem is there are too many badly written ones that their only character point is their sexuality. Livvy Dunne. Exactly. The sexuality should be just a small part of the character and it shouldn't matter that much, but for some reason they keep making characters where their whole identity is their gender or sexual orientation, and then they're also making the characters really poorly written to top of to make sure the character is just the worst. Exodore 2000. Yeah, that even reminds me of that recent South Park episode. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, that episode was crazy. I'm a huge fan of South Park, and the way they had Cartman's become Kathleen Kennedy, and then at the end of the episode when she finally figures it out, I just found it hilarious. Exodore 2000. Otherwise, similar hatred would be directed at Japanese developers which have had solid female lead roles in their games for years. It's only when kids combined with preachy identity politics that it tends to draw their ire. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, there's been a lot of strong female characters in Japanese games, but the issue is when the characters become preachy, people start to hate on the game when really it would just be a good game if it wasn't for the one character who is to push identity politics all the time. Exodore 2000. There is a very big difference between minority and female characters existing in games and forced representation, i.e. tokenism, where a character is created purely for the sake of virtue signaling and imposing the social justice bias into the story. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it's such a big difference, but a lot of time people don't see the difference and they think that people are hating on it because they don't want minority characters, but really people only hate it when the only point of the character is just to push their agenda onto the story or to try and make it a political statement when it really didn't need to be. Exodore 2000. Blizzard even used a scale that had numerical numbers for each aspect of the tokenism they wanted to add into their games. Livvy Dunne. Wait, is that actually a thing or is that just a joke? I can't even tell cause I know Blizzard is crazy, but that sounds insane. Exodore 2000. https://www.wildhead.com/news/kings diversity space tool a lead forward for inclusion in gaming 327,053. Livvy Dunne. Oh wow, I thought that was just an article or something, but no, that's actually a thing. And wow, I thought people were just making assumptions, but I guess when Blizzard made the statement about making the most diverse video game, they meant it. Exodore 2000. Nope, it was real. It's still online. I see some sites took it down, but you can still find it online. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, I didn't think it'd actually be real, tbh. I mean, who would actually do that? But it seems like Blizzard is completely unhinged, so I should have expected it. Exodore 2000. There was a fairly well-done explanation of this put out recently by a literature devil on why manga triumphs over woke Western comics in the market by focusing on diversity of story rather than the cringy tokenist diversity we see in Western media. This is what the Gamergate community is actually concerned with. The rest of the Wikipedia article is really just a TLDR-ish Gallup version of the summary at the top. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, I mean, mangas are definitely better than most Western comics cause they actually write stories that are original and have substance instead of just pushing the woke stuff, and people really don't seem to realize that when people think of these games and comics, they don't actually care about the character itself being diverse. They just want it to be a good character with a well-written story. And the reason why anime is also so popular is that there's so much of it for everyone. You can find almost any genre of anime and it's really good and enjoyable. Exodore 2000. It immediately dives into doubling down on placing extreme overemphasis on the harassment narrative and guilt by association for the rest of Gamergate that had no part in it. But more importantly, this is where we start to see where the major problem with Wikipedia's Gamergate article really lies. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, and the fact that they ignore so many points and just talk about the harassment that took place, it's like they completely disregard everything that was going on and why people were upset about. But the whole article is really one-sided, and it even tries to downplay the whole thing by claiming that it was basically this whole small thing that turned into this huge political right-wing movement, when in reality it was much more than just that and really wasn't political at its origins. But it became political when everything started getting attacked, and it just kept going from there. Exodore 2000. Their sources. The sources Wikipedia is using here are overwhelmingly just opinion editorials or published works focused on opinion. They do not actually provide any serious evidence for their claims, nor any study with provided methodology that can be falsified, and therefore they have no more basis in fact than any random effort post you might find on any random forums. Livvy Dunne. The fact that they're using sources that are so heavily based in opinion and not using actual facts from a non-biased or non-political source is just ridiculous. It's like they're just trying to create their own version of what happened and trying to make it seem as bad as possible when it definitely wasn't that bad, and people were mainly upset about the actual journalism aspects of the whole thing instead of it being about right-wing extremism. Exodore 2000. For example, the first 5 sources that are not books are all opinion editorials to emphasize how idiotic that is. Even 4chan's news board does not allow the use of opinion editorials. Yes, that's right, 4chan's news board has higher standards for sources than Wikipedia. This is nothing short of absolutely embarrassing. Livvy Dunne. Oh wow, it's embarrassing that 4chan has higher standards than Wikipedia. Wikipedia is like the place people go to learn things or just read articles and have a lot of their sources be opinion articles is just crazy. Exodore 2000. Probably why some schools won't let that be your only source. Livvy Dunne. They should never let that be a source, tbh, cause it's not even reliable. I mean, the whole point of it was that it could be edited by anyone, and you can't do that for reliable sources. I'm sure Wikipedia even says themselves that should only be used to get the main idea of a topic, but never should be used for actual research. Exodore 2000. So let's look at some more highlights in the section of then harassment. Aside from just being an example of dishonest emphasis and omission, many of the sources utilized the double standard policy when talking about incidents of harassment. All of Gamergate is presumed as guilty, but when mentioning Gamergate, you talk about ethics in journalism. If any mention is made of them at all, they will fall back on the inaccurate claim that Gamergate has no clear manifesto, implying that they therefore cannot represent the movement. So basically, individuals are only allowed to represent Gamergate when those individuals say something that agrees with the narrative being pushed. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it's just a completely ridiculous double standard that they have, and it makes it seem like Gamergate was just one massive harassment campaign where everyone was going after the innocent journalists when that wasn't the case at all. There were a few instances of harassment which I never condone at all, cause that's just not how you go about things, but a lot of what they were saying was just legitimate criticism and not harassment at all. Exodore 2000. A good example of this is Source 8 from the Christian Science Monitor in the section on organization. The false claim that Gamergate has no clearly defined agenda is again repeated, despite it being laid out quite simply on the Gamergate wiki. Anyone can't just go there and see that. This claim is untrue. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, cause the agenda was laid out clearly and anyone could go see exactly what it was and how it was meant to be, but when people just read this wiki article about it, they aren't going to read any actual legitimate sources and they'll just believe that the agenda was never real until the whole harassment narrative or whatever other thing they come up with, and they'll believe that for whatever reason it became political when it was a movement about people who like video games and the issues they had with the way the gaming journalism industry was at the time and how people were just ignoring it. Exodore 2000. In source number 101 cited through source number 93, we reach an opinion article by The Atlantic that provides zero evidence for this position and states that he could not find a single explanation of a coherent Gamergate position, but yet somehow they are very certain that it's a harassment campaign. So these people are basically flat out admitting that they don't really understand Gamergate at all, and yet somehow they are considered a reliable source of information. Livvy Dunne. Oh, wow, I didn't know. They admitted that they didn't understand it, but still call it a harassment campaign. That's just insane, cause if you truly didn't understand something, then you shouldn't have an opinion on it, cause you don't know about it, and yet Wikipedia is still allowing these people to talk about a subject they don't understand, and it's just crazy. Exodore 2000. In the section on harassment and Twitter, opinion editorials, etc., etc., etc. Again, no actual objective evidence in any of these sources that Gamergate is primarily a harassment campaign, as Wikipedia claims in the section on public perception. The sources here tell us that #NotYourShield is an invalid movement because some people on 4chan were shitposting about it in IRC. Livvy Dunne. That just does not make any sense to me. That's like saying the women's rights movement should be invalid because some men were saying something on a website. They didn't have actual evidence to prove their point. They just had things other people said. Do they not realize how dumb that sounds? Exodore 2000. Brilliant reasoning. They guess the message that corrupt journalists were using harassment accusations to shield themselves from criticism is an invalid message because some random people from 4chan talk about it. That's totally not a genetic fallacy at all, I guess. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, and the fact that it actually got approved by an editor is just crazy, cause there's so much wrong with what they said and yet they still approved of it. I wouldn't be surprised if the whole article was just edited by them to make it seem like Gamergate was horrible and there was no reasoning behind it. Exodore 2000. And in the purpose and goals section, Wikipedia tries to refute the claim that Gamergate is about ethics and journalism by quoting mostly opinion editorials. Again, however, one of the sources here, number 87, stands out. Unlike the other sources, this one is actually not an opinion editorial. This one claims to actually have some verifiable data proving the claim that it's all harassment campaign. Livvy Dunne. How do you prove something like that? Like what data could they have gotten about the purpose of a huge group of people that were all against the same thing? Cause that just makes no sense. It's like they were trying to make the argument that this was just some giant harassment group but just had no evidence other than opinion articles, cause even if they actually surveyed people to see what they thought, why would people be honest about that on a survey? And if they did a survey, that's still just opinion based and isn't actually fact about what Gamergate was. Exodore 2000. Now this article really needs a good look because I believe it perfectly emphasizes the extreme dishonesty of the establishment media when dealing with Gamergate. The study analyzed tweets about Gamergate aimed at Sarkeesian, Quinwood, Kotaku, Alexander Grayson, and Totolo, and then made the argument that because the women received more tweets than the men, then clearly Gamergate must be about harassing women. Livvy Dunne. That's so stupid because of course they would receive more tweets and it doesn't prove that it's all harassment when I'm sure most of the messages they received were just people commenting about the things about those for women that they didn't like. And then it can't possibly prove that they make it as a whole was just a harassment campaign because those women were such a small part of it and it just shows their extreme bias towards all of those women. Exodore 2000. Now I understand that data analysis can be confusing, so allow me to give an analogy that just shows how absurd this is. Say you are the head of a company that creates snacks for children. A salesman comes to you with a pitch that his new chip-flavored lollipop will be all the rage with the kids these days. In order to prove that kids like to eat chip, the salesman conducted a study examining school playground conversations. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, that's actually a really good example of how stupid that whole thing was, cause it's really similar. And the most annoying thing about this is that I doubt they're even going to change it, and they'll just leave all the misinformation in there and most people will never know that it wasn't actually a harassment campaign to begin with. Exodore 2000. It limited the scope of this study down to that of specifically eating shit while ignoring all other conversations about crap. The salesman then shows you that within this limited conversation scope, kids discussed eating shit more than they discussed not eating shit, therefore kids must like to eat shit. The salesman also refuses to provide the full methodology of his study when looking at the limited data that he did provide you discovered that this percentage of kids who actually wanted to eat shit in the conversation about doing so was only 1.26. Livvy Dunne. Oh, that's an actually good comparison though, cause that is exactly what they did and what they chose to focus on just because the kids were talking about it more, which makes it sound like these kids were just talking about eating it when in reality there were more people saying they didn't like it. Exodore 2000. When you look at the salesman and tell him that this actually proves that kids do not want to eat shit, the salesman smiles and calls you a bigot. This is legitimately the same logic as what this Newsweek brand watch study is doing. They limited their analysis to 10% of Gamergate tweets that were about the specific people and groups they had in mind, while ignoring all the rest of the conversation. Livvy Dunne. That's a really stupid thing to do, like even when you look at that you couldn't draw the conclusions that this study did because even if they were talking about those 4 people who they think are so special, they still weren't the whole group, cause there were tons of people talking about the other side of Gamergate and saying why they didn't like those people and what they did, and there was a lot more of that than people being like, yeah, I love these people. Exodore 2000. What about the overwhelming majority of the Gamergate conversation that had nothing to do with these people? Where did that data go? Well, we don't know because Newsweek did not publish the full results of their study and methodology at all. And when we look at the data that is limited to what they did make public, we see that only 1.26 of tweets analyzed were actually negative towards these people out of the total amount of tweets analyzed. You cannot make this shit up. Well, they kind of just did. Livvy Dunne. That's literally so dumb. They're creating misinformation on purpose by just cherry-picking the information to fit their narrative. It's ridiculous that they think what they did could somehow be considered a study. Exodore 2000. So yeah, of course if you only focus on a small subset of the data that only gives specific attributes, you're going to mainly find data in regards to those attributes. No shit, Sherlock. Now if they really wanted to honestly examine if Gamergate was a hate mob or about ethics and journalism, they could just randomly select from all Gamergate tweets and simply rate the tweet on whether it was harassment or if it was criticism of journalism or other, and most importantly of all, publish the methodology and research papers publicly in full. Livvy Dunne. That's a really good point. Like obviously if you are focusing on hate messages, then you're not going to get positive messages, so I just don't understand how they could just not realize that, oh wait, they did realize that and just decided that this would work better in their favor, so the way they did it wouldn't work. They did admit that they don't really understand this whole thing, so they're literally just trying to create something that isn't there. Exodore 2000. Limiting the scope of the conversation in a case like this is completely unnecessary, and the fact that their methodology cannot be replicated or verified since they didn't provide it leads us to the most probable conclusion. conclusion. This study was conducted in bad faith, torturing the data until the data agrees with the presupposed conclusion was their end goal all along. Total Biscuit also did a take on this. Livvy Dunne. That's really embarrassing for such a large website or company to do. I guess the only way you can make it sound really bad is to force the data to agree with you, so they had to do that. I mean, they couldn't have just created this huge and lengthy article based off of a bunch of different people saying basically the same thing about journalists, so they just picked and chose what they thought would make GamerNet look worse and created a narrative that wasn't even true. Exodore 2000. The recent statistical analysis by Newsweek attempted to prove the Gamergate supporters are by and large using the hashtag to harass women, yet their analysis was clearly flawed. They attempt to create the link by showing that Anita Sarkeesian and Brianna Wu were the individuals that received the most tweets, which also contained the Gamergate hashtag. Livvy Dunne. Even if those were the most tweets they received, all that's saying is just that people were talking about those two individuals. And there was definitely good reason why people were talking about them, because they were the ones who made false statements like Anita going and saying she wasn't even a gamer, and then her whole controversy about women in video games. It's not like people just randomly decided to hate on these people for no reason or just because they're women. Exodore 2000. However, their analysis also showed that the vast majority of these tweets were neutral in nature and contained neither positive nor negative tone. Now, unless we're claiming that tweeting at this person equals harassment, which is in itself ridiculous, I find it hard to take this as proof that the majority of people participating in this thing want to harass women. Indeed, what we see is that the two people who have most actively engaged with hashtag Gamergate in a negative fashion, throwing constant accusations at it over Twitter, are the ones who have in turn received the most feedback. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, cause who would have guessed that they're the ones that started the thing, and so they are gonna get the most attention, whether that's positive or negative. Most people wouldn't really care unless they make false statements about gaming or attack other people, and they are the ones who started it by making those statements. Exodore 2000. This is entirely illogical. Those who have not actively done so have received less direct engagement. This is how social media works. It's this kind of deliberate twisting of the facts that I find deeply concerning. This study, in my opinion, is the biggest 1984 George Orwell moment out of all of Wikipedia's sources. The data clearly proved the exact opposite of what Newsweek is claiming, but everyone else at the time was so afraid to question the narrative lest they be labeled as part of the hate mob that they got away with it. Livvy Dunne. I mean, it's pretty crazy when you think about it. A literal news website blatantly lying about a ton of stuff just to fit their narrative. It is truly scary to think that they would put out something like that and not care about the consequences of their actions. Exodore 2000. From this point, the Wikipedia article continues on a predictable pattern. One-sided takes while citing opinion articles. No real evidence. More one-sided takes citing opinion articles. The FBI telling these clowns to fuck off because they have better things to do. Livvy Dunne. It's really like they just wanted to create their own little world in the Wikipedia article where they can just twist the truth around what really happened with this whole thing, and now they just have a bunch of misinformation on their site. Like I did if they thought just because it's a news website that they can get away with that, but hopefully more people will become aware of this and the article will be rewritten to be actually more accurate, or maybe even just deleted. I mean, that will probably never happen, but one can't dream. Exodore 2000. Yeah, I remember hearing the other person say the FBI got involved. He failed to mention they looked at it and decided it was a waste of their time. Livvy Dunne. Mail. I heard that too. I think the FBI literally thought they said the Gamergate issue would be low priority and that they would rather use their resources for bigger issues like terrorism. And so they chose not to look into it. And then the media decided to twist it to make it sound like the FBI said that Gamergate was no big deal, so people who already thought it was a harassment campaign went with it. Exodore 2000. And so on and so forth. One thing worthy of note, though, is that as we reach down towards the end with the legacy and game industry response, we start to see examples of circular reporting, and this is something that even people who would generally consider to be on the left have noticed is a problem with Wikipedia. Members in the game industry saw overwhelmingly negative coverage of Gamergate at this time by the establishment media, so as not to harm their own reputations, they of course spoke critically of it, and then Wikipedia recorded the negative feedback. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah, it's definitely a problem, especially in this case, cause like you said, it's mostly just a ton of people saying the same thing about it cause of the bias they have against Gamergate, and then you start seeing that that's what most of the article is like. I honestly just think the page should be rewritten cause then there's just too much bias and stuff, so I'm pretty concerned for any future topics they pick. Exodore 2000. More people in high places see the negative feedback on Wikipedia, assume it is true, and then it ends up on Wikipedia, and around it goes. This, in my opinion, calls the legitimacy of the entire thing into very serious question. How many of these news articles are genuine original takes, and how many are just jumping on the bandwagon after reading about it on Wikipedia? Livvy Dunne. That's actually really true. It's like just a huge circle of misinformation where the misinformation on Wikipedia is what's used to create opinion pieces, which then makes the misinformation on Wikipedia seem more real because these opinion pieces are written by big websites, and then these opinion pieces are then used as evidence for Wikipedia. That S a really bad circle of misinformation that really just feeds itself. I really wonder how many people use Wikipedia as a source for information and just believe whatever's on the Wikipedia page without bothering to fact check it. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah, it's definitely a problem, especially in this case, cause like you said, it's mostly just a ton of people saying the same thing about it cause of the bias they have against Gamergate, and then you start seeing that that's what most of the article is like. I honestly just think the page should be rewritten cause then there's just too much bias and stuff, so I'm pretty concerned for any future topics they pick. Exodore 2000. More people in high places see the negative feedback on Wikipedia, assume it is true, and then it ends up on Wikipedia, and around it goes. This, in my opinion, calls the legitimacy of the entire thing into very serious question. How many of these news articles are genuine original takes, and how many are just jumping on the bandwagon after reading about it on Wikipedia? Livvy Dunne. That's actually really true. It's like just a huge circle of misinformation where the misinformation on Wikipedia is what's used to create opinion pieces, which then makes the misinformation on Wikipedia seem more real because these opinion pieces are written by big websites, and then these opinion pieces are then used as evidence for Wikipedia. That S a really bad circle of misinformation that really just feeds itself. I really wonder how many people use Wikipedia as a source for information and just believe whatever's on the Wikipedia page without bothering to fact check it. Exodore 2000. This is the main reason I am not going over 100 of the Wikipedia's Gamergate article in every single source. It would get redundant as most of the establishment media simply repeated the same misinformation with slightly different takes. This circle jerk can also be seen in many RedTube videos that mirror the propaganda playbook of placing a dishonesty high amount of emphasis on the harassment narrative while making zero effort to even acknowledge, let alone refute arguments from the other side. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, the way that every source pretty much just went with what their friends were saying, basically, and wouldn't acknowledge the full story is really weird and kinda messed up. Yeah, they really didn't even bother trying to get all of the facts, and the arguments just went with one side because that was what their other friends did, and it was a trendy thing to do. Exodore 2000. Basically just intellectually lazy grifters copying their narrative from Wikipedia in order to virtual signal downloading approved opinions. .xml. You get the idea. Nothing special there. We can find further evidence against this narrative on the GG Wiki, which Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it's really lazy, and they all just keep repeating the same things over and over again without bothering to look deeper into it. But to be honest, it's not exactly surprising that that would happen with the fact that so much information is on the internet these days, so a lot of people think that means they don't need to put in the work themselves and they just take what others are saying. Exodore 2000. Claims that Wikipedia administrators fabricated a harassment narrative which then spread through the media without correction. That's a pretty harsh allegation, so let's see what evidence they have to support it. Well, not much really, just multiple cases of rejecting any source that disagreed with their predetermined narrative. Multiple cases of people being banned for disagreeing with the predetermined narrative. Arbitration case on Wikipedia that is a clown show of non-existent reasoning skills. Dozens of evidence regarding bias in the administration, and of course Wikipedia staff demanding the deletion of evidence of their bullshit, but most importantly looking into The deep freeze wiki shows us just how much Wikipedia emitted. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it really is like they just have this bias against anything that they don't agree with, and so anytime someone comes along they just find a way to shut them up. Like, in my opinion, you can't really have a good wiki article if you delete or deny any evidence that doesn't agree with what you have already decided. Like, you aren't supposed to be putting opinion at all, and so when you put your opinions into what you're saying, it makes the whole article flawed. Exodore 2000. Gamergate actually made their own proposed Wikipedia entry, which includes the issues of ethics in journalism, such as Game Journal Proslick, which proved that journalists were colluding on narratives and pay brand deals where developers were trying to pay big-name YouTubers to shill their games with contractual obligations. Of course, that the shilling had to include positive reviews. There's also dozens of instances that Gamergate uncovered of journalists positively recovering their friends without any disclosure. Livvy Dunne. Oh yeah, the evidence of journalists colluding to create these narratives and the whole thing about YouTubers being paid to shill their games would be so much more useful than what's in the current Gamergate article, and so many of these journalists even got caught lying about not having any relationship with developers, so that just creates even more trust issues cause you can't trust them now. Exodore 2000. So that brings up the question, how did this happen? How is it Wikipedia places its stamp of approval on something so blatantly biased? Well, the problem comes down to a combination of serious issues that the Wikipedia administration has failed to address. The first of these is that Wikipedia no longer has an effective neutral point of view policy. The co-founder of Wikipedia, Larry Singer, pointed out the problem on his blog, explaining how the current administration has abandoned and posed for the dogma of false balance. Livvy Dunne. I mean, it does seem like they're no longer neutral. I wonder how much of this is just the admin's opinions rather than being factual. Because if you're supposed to be neutral, then having people who want to push their opinions doesn't exactly make the site too reliable. Exodore 2000. This effectively allows the admins to decide what is and what isn't true as a final say, and because these people overwhelmingly lead towards the DNC in American politics, this means that just about every political issue on Wikipedia ends up being filled with DNC propaganda being reported as it is fact. This bias is also mirrored in their reliable sources that regularly represent a highly opinionated leftist bias. Livvy Dunne. And so, in conclusion, if you want to have a neutral site, then this whole system isn't the best way to go about it. Like, it just ends up turning into an echo chamber of the opinions of a few people, and since that's all people see, they go along with that. Exodore 2000. Like HuffPost are allowed, while sources that present highly opinionated right-wing bias like New York Post are blacklisted. This just further shows how Wikipedia no longer follows their rules for maintaining the viable neutral point of view strategy. Oh, and by the way, WikiLeaks is blacklisted. Yes, I am not kidding. If anything shows that Wikipedia is completely full of it, it's this, because it's important to know that nothing on WikiLeaks has ever been proven false. To date, WikiLeaks has an extremely robust vetting process to ensure the documents they publish are genuine. They have a perfect record. You can argue over the unconventional practices of WikiLeaks all you like, but the truth remains that what they release is solid. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, it's pretty shocking that you can put these really opinionated sources into something and then claim it's neutral. And also, I really trust WikiLeaks cause the content they're releasing is true, because like you said, nothing they've released has ever been proven to be false, and they really do a lot of work to make sure everything is proven and correct before they release it, which is something that isn't really common in many news outlets these days. Exodore 2000. So why did WikiLeaks have to be declared an invalid source? So I know why, because they called these liars out on their BS. They said, in regards to Gamergate, it has been slandered in the media through various tabloid hit pieces as a hate movement via faulty evidence cherry picking and publishing articles marked by poor ethics, lack of fact-checking, outright lying, and yellow journalism. This mirrors some of the same corruption practiced within larger media outlets and governments. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, I mean, I always thought that a news site is supposed to be about the facts, not what they think is correct, so it really doesn't make any sense why he would blacklist those sites. I mean, I can maybe see how they thought the articles they were using were fine, and they just looked at the surface level stuff, but honestly it seems pretty damn important to look into it deeper than that, and if you do, it's really easy to see that it's really not what they say it is. Exodore 2000. Finally, you run into the issue of verifiability, not truth. Wikipedia requires all information to come from what is deemed by the mods and admins as a reliable source, even if that information can be demonstrated to be completely illogical in their own words. Sometimes we know for sure that reliable sources are in error, but we cannot find replacement sources that are correct. This means if a so-called reliable source posts something about what is written on an internet blog that is false, Wikipedia will side with the reliable source, even though anyone can't just go to the blog and clearly see that the reliable source is wrong. This wouldn't be too big of an issue if Wikipedia was actually reasonable about which sources are reliable and still had an effective endpoint policy like they used to in the early 2000s, but they no longer do. This effectively means that logic and reason do not matter to Wikipedia, and that's a very big problem, as logic and reason is usually the first line of defense against propaganda. This explains Livvy Dunne. I really wonder why it's taken them so long to fix these issues, and really they should have never been issues in the first place, and it would just be the first line of defense. But if the defense is flawed, then it just kind of throws everything off. Like they should really try and find some more ways to make sure that everything is true, because it's really not a good thing to have a lot of misinformation floating around, since that can cause a lot of damage if people believe it to be true. Exodore 2000. Why just about every political article on Wikipedia is now so one-sided? Just as a test, you can do yourself look up the last 8 presidents of the United States and just note the extreme difference in tone and coverage between political parties, the disparity and bias against Republican presidents, plus the omission of scandals from Democrat presidents is blindingly obvious. The truth of Gamergate is that it was a movement still ongoing that exposed a lot of corruption in the mainstream media and games journalism, and in order to avoid that criticism, the media turned to the harassment narrative as a red herring, opting to publish hundreds of articles that were either shit opinion pieces with zero reproducible evidence or demonstrably flawed studies that, when analyzed, were clearly conducted in bad faith. They omitted all the good things Gamergate did from their narrative and all of what they uncovered, and instead placed an extraordinarily dishonest amount of attention and weight on a harassment story that was again by Livvy Dunne. And yes, it really does seem like Wikipedia just wants to paint a picture of Gamergate being some evil movement, but they never mention any of the good stuff that really happened, and they also really just made a mountain out of an anthill with the harassment claims, and it's just kind of ridiculous. TBH, like the level of misinformation is crazy. Exodore 2000. Their own data, only 1% of the movement at worst, and from this we can piece the final verdict on what the Gamergate article on Wikipedia really means. The entire thing can effectively be summarized as there are no ethical problems or issues of corruption within gaming journalism or the mainstream media, and anyone who disagrees is a sexist bigot. Source: gaming journalists and the mainstream media. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, you can help out by sharing it with your friends, as videos on this topic have a very high chance of being shadow banned. Livvy Dunne. Yeah, from the data, the harassment was just so incredibly small, and it didn't ever become that big of an issue, cause when it did, the majority of the movement called it out as being wrong to harass people, and they said it should never have happened. But yeah, the whole article is just trying to paint Gamergate as this evil, misogynistic movement, when all it wanted to do was try to fix the flaws that existed in the gaming industry, which would have really made it and the state of gaming today so much better.